Hi everyone, it's Fiona here from fionamarks.com, and I'm back today continuing my series about astrology and parenting, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. And I'm really interested in how astrology can provide new insights for us as parents and help us think about parenting in new ways. So last week, I had a primer for you on parenting styles, and we talked all about malefic planets and benefic planets and what we can learn from them in our natural parenting styles, and how there's not one of those that is good or bad. I know those words sound like that, and that's just a kind of cultural language thing, but that we're all having experiences that are more demanding of us, and experiences that are easier and more supportive. And that's really what those different planetary energies are about. Anyway, this week I have a different primer for you, and it's all about those truisms that maybe we hear kicked around, that children are a blessing or children bring joy, and how astrology is really rich and nuanced in the way that children show up in our chart. So let me share the screen here. Okay. So here we are. Children are a source of joy. That we can think that children are a blessing. And maybe I'll just put this on this view is probably fine. Let's see. We can think that children are a blessing, and it is a truism that is kicked around, and it's a beautiful thing, and thank goodness that we say that. But in reality, I'm sure as a parent, you've experienced that it's actually really rich, the relationship that you have with your children, and that that you may feel that children bring joy, but you may find that they bring a whole lot of responsibility or a whole lot of hard work. You might find that being with your children is draining, or maybe it's energizing, or maybe it's challenging. And astrology has a few ways of looking at that. So in astrology, there's a few important things. Maybe we could start with thinking about that in astrology, there are houses, and you may have heard of the first house or the second house, and altogether there are 12 of these houses, and they represent the areas that karma is going to show up in our life. So where those planetary energies are, is where that karma is going to play out. Or the houses that the planet rules, it's going to bring that energy into the karma. And so when we think about children, we in astrology think about the fifth house, because the fifth house is our legacy and what we leave behind after we've left this lifetime. And of course, children are the perfect example of something that we leave behind. It's our genetic contribution to the human race that we leave behind. When we've left the body, our genes are still carrying on in some way, and just as we are carrying the genes of all of those parents that have come before us to create me here. So the fifth house is where we look, and the fifth house also represents creativity, which children are also our creation. But it represents all sorts of creativity and intelligence. So the fifth house represents many things, but one of them is children, and that's where we're going to look if we want to find out something about your unique children and the way that you will feel towards them, or the way that they will associate with things in your life. So without getting, I don't want to get too much into the nitty gritty of exactly your chart. You don't even need to know what your chart is, but just be open to this idea that we don't all feel the same way about having children. For example, if you were an Aries or a Pisces ascendant, then the children become their own indicators, because for Pisces, the fifth house is Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, and the moon only rules one house. So, and for Aries, the 5th house is Leo, which is ruled by the sun, and the sun only rules one house. So that means that if you're either of those ascendants, your children have a unique place in your life, and they're not sharing that indicator with another role. So a simpler kind of energy for the children. But if you're a Scorpio or a Taurus ascendant, then your children become linked with responsibility, because for a Taurus, and for a Scorpio, the house that it rules ends up being one that is shared with the second house. So the planet that rules the 5th house for Taurus and for Scorpio also rules the second house of responsibilities and resources. And that may make you the kind of parent who is very responsible for your children, or expects your children to be responsible. It's something that you're looking to create in them. You think it's a good value for them to have. And this continues because for Gemini and Sagittarius, their indicator, the planet that rules children, also rules their 12th house of transcending and moving on from this material world of spiritual things, rules spiritual things, but also rules institutions, and it rules losses. The 12th is where we're always spending, it's always leaving. And so therefore our 12th, the children naturally, for Gemini and Sagittarius ascendants, naturally can have, perhaps we have a draining, spending time or energy with our children can drain our energy. It can be spiritually inspiring or guiding us, or it may lead us something about that. The children may be linked to institutions, and through maybe hospitals or through schools or boarding schools. So, and many other ways that might play out. For a Cancer or Capricorn ascendant, children are linked with the 10th house. So they become something that we're recognized for. And it may mean that we want our children to be a good example that is seen by the world. You know, our identity, our public identity is associated with our children. And we're very activated and motivated about our children. It's something very public and very energizing for us that we're a parent and these children are important. And then if you are a Leo or Aquarius ascendant, your children are naturally linked with the 8th house of change and transformation. So something about having children might provide change in your life. You may have a very changeable life once you have children, or there could be changes in the relationship with the children. Could be, you know, a very dynamic, alive kind of relationship, but also could also be very spiritual and maybe open us up to things that we're interested in, that it's not until we have children that we really want to investigate something or research something. Maybe we become deeper, more knowledgeable about something that perhaps is a little hidden until we have children. And if you're a Virgo ascendant, then naturally your the same indicator that rules children rules hard work, and the 6th house of hard work and struggle and daily routines. So therefore our children might seem like they require a lot of attention. Our children might really thrive from a daily routine. They might thrive when we give them that attention of keeping them on schedule and helping them do all of those earthbound tasks that are important. And if you're a Libra ascendant, then your children are linked with happiness and home. So in some ways, all of the ascendants that we could say children bring joy, perhaps it is just the Libra ascendant that we could say is most likely that would play out. But of course, it can always go the other way, that children on one hand can be linked to our happiness and contentment, which is the fourth house. But of course, the fourth house is also our emotional safe place, and the children may compete with that and maybe strain that emotional sanctuary that we have. So it depends on all the indicators that are there in your chart. And as I said, it doesn't actually matter what your chart is. You don't need to know any of this, but I guess what I find really helpful about astrology is that it's encouraging us to experience life in real time, to accept life as it is, and not impose that children should be hardworking or should cause happiness or should be responsible or should be dynamic. That actually astrology is encouraging us to just interact with our children as is natural for us, because we all have our own way to have that very special, important relationship. What we can notice is that there are 4 paths in the Vedic model of life. There's a path of dharmic inspiration, that is doing what one should do and what one is inspired to do, one's inner calling. There's the path of hard work and success, that we need to provide for ourselves on this planet. We have to, part of our responsibility is to look after ourselves and to work with the material experience here and be successful. Then there is the desire path of coming to this play area called planet Earth and having the experiences that we want to have, whether those are we love eating, or we love dancing, or we love being with people. We love being recognized and being part of the group. So many different desires that we can have to be here. That's an important path. And there's also the enlightenment path that we're all walking along, opening ourselves up to why we're really here and how to become at peace in the experience of being a spiritual being in a physical world. So these 4 paths of inspiration, responsibility and hard work, desires and liberation, we've all got those in our charts. They're all represented, but the way the planets are in these shared house rulerships, it's very interesting that children are only linked with Artha houses, that is work and successful houses, or spiritual moksha enlightenment houses. They're not linked naturally to desire houses or to inspirational houses. So I think that's very interesting pattern in itself. So that's one big thought. That's why I do the primers, because if you haven't been exposed to astrology before, it's a lot of new ways of looking at things. So the first big thought is there's no should in our relationship with children, that for some people, children are going to cause joy, and for some people, they're going to cause spiritual awakening, and for some people, they're going to cause fame, and for some people, they're going to cause hard work, etc., etc. So let's not go into the idea of being a parent that there's some standard way that a parent should feel in relation to their children. Big thought number 1. The second important thought about children are a source of joy is that regardless of the combination that naturally occurs with the indicators that we already talked about in big thought 1, regardless of that, the planet that represents your children is going to be located in the chart somewhere and tell you something about your relationship with your children. So for example, you may find, let's take this Libra ascendant, that the children are linked with happiness and home. So that is because Saturn rules the 5th house, but it also rules the 4th house. So naturally, it's connecting children with the home and with emotional contentment. But Saturn itself might be placed in the sky when you were born, for example, in your 6th house of hard work. So you might have children that bring you happiness, and you need to be constantly doing the daily tasks, the chores. You need to keep these kids on routines all the time. It's a constant attention type of relationship. Or same situation, the children are ruled by Saturn, causing children to be linked with happiness for a Libra ascendant, but they're in the second house for that person for when the moment that they were born. So they're going to be causing happiness, but the person also feels really responsible for them and is really concerned about being resourced to care for these children. That's what's important, is that I have the resources to be able to do this job of parenting well. Okay, so these are the two thoughts. One is your own unique relationship with your children is different from everybody else's. Don't accept some kind of stereotype that all parents feel the same way. And then second thought is the planet that represents your relationship with your children is going to be in a unique position in your own chart. So even if you are an Aries ascendant that shares the same type of relationship with all other Aries ascendants have with their children, however, your unique Aries ascendant whose planet that represents children has gone into its own unique house. And let's have a look at some examples, because it's a bit hard to get your head around. So I've gone to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle because they are the two people that are on my blog, where you can go through and have a look house by house, so that if after looking at this you want to get a bit more detail and dig in a little bit more, there's a chapter on each of their 12 houses on my blog. But if we look at the basics of Prince Harry's chart, what we can see is that we have got the ascendant here in Capricorn, and there's no exam at the end of this primer. So if this makes sense or doesn't make sense, just relax. When we know where the ascendant is, we know that that's the first house. So first house, second house, third house, fourth house, fifth house is over here in Taurus. So this tells us a few things straight away about Prince Harry and his relationship with his children. And this applies to some extent to all of your children. At this point in time, Prince Harry has one, so it's kind of easy for us to talk about it. We know that the fifth house is in Taurus, and Taurus is an earth sign, and it's a fixed sign. So it's a very stable kind of place, a stable, earthy place. And Taurus, the sign, is ruled by Venus. And Venus gets to rule two houses in Vedic astrology. And in this case, it rules its house of Taurus, which for a Capricorn ascendant is the fifth house, but it also rules the 10th house, which is Libra. So for all Capricorn ascendants, their children are linked with their reputation or their fame, or the role that they play, the job that they do, the activity that they're known for, the 10th house of being visible and activated. So for Capricorn ascendants, their children are very activating in their life. The act of having children makes things happen in a Capricorn's life. Now, to add to that even more, in this case, Venus itself, when the prince was born, was in Libra. So he just happens to have that indicator in the 10th house. So there's a few things that we could say about that this child is probably going to be famous, right? Because it's the child, the fifth, is here in the 10th house of fame. And that is true. This little person that we don't get to see very many photos of, but we all know that he exists. So a child that is famous, but also that having this child we see is going to be activating, because not only is it in the 10th house, but the planet itself is in the 10th house. So it's going to bring a whole lot of energy and noticeable energy into this person's life. So sometimes often they say that it's those associations with the 10th house that are the most visible, right? And so perhaps that's a good place to just say that, yeah, we can see that this child for Prince Harry is going to be famous and is going to be very activating in the prince's life. And you know, it's going to have some kind of Venus. There's going to be a bit of devotion. There's some kind of devotion energy there because Venus has that devoted sort of energy. So perhaps creating devotion in the prince. Now let's have a look at Meghan Markle's house. And what's fascinating, although it happens many times with couples, is some beautiful mirror image synergy happening between these two charts. And I use these guys quite a bit because I have them on the blog. So in a previous video, a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking about K2, and we used both these guys. And not only do they share this symmetry that you may be seeing, but their Rahu and Ketus share a symmetry as well. But that's on another video. For this video, we can have a look and see that the ascendant for Meghan Markle is in Cancer. And that means that counting from the ascendant, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth house is in Scorpio. And that is a water sign. And it is also a fixed sign. So both Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have this fifth house fixed, meaning there's a certain amount of stability there innate in the placement. And Scorpio is ruled in Vedic astrology by Mars, which also rules two houses, and the other house that it rules is Aries, which is also Meghan Markle's 10th house. So you can see that both Prince Harry and Meghan Markle share, although it's different planets and they're different ascendants, they share this common energetic connection that children and fame, or children and activation, children and what I'm known for, children and what I do outside of the home, they're very connected. So they share that similar, you know, maybe that gives them a good wavelength to be on. However, while Prince Harry's was ruled by Venus, in this case, Scorpio and Aries are ruled by Mars. So the planet that describes the relationship that Meghan Markle has with her child is through the energy of Mars. And Mars for Meghan Markle is on her ascendant, on her first house. So we can say a couple of things about this. One is that when the ruler of the fifth house is with the first house, we know that children are going to play an important role in this person's life path because the first house represents their life path. So this is someone who may have always been interested in having children, or may have always associated with having children. However, just like Prince Harry, she shares that with the 10th house. So there's this struggle in a way between children and work because they're sharing the same indicator, or between children and fame, between children and the thing that we're known for and that we do outside of the home. So there's a tension because one planet is trying to represent both of those things. And it can be easier maybe to do that when we think of the fifth house as the creative house and the legacy house, that you can link your creativity and legacy to the activity that you're known for. And these guys have. So Meghan Markle does a creative job of acting, and that's what she's known for. That's what her fame is. And Prince Harry has created these legacy charities that will go on beyond him, and that's what he's known for. So when you can line up for these two guys, their fame and their legacy, that goes together really nicely. But what happens when that becomes a child? And we know from Prince Harry's life that he felt that his childhood was maybe too public. So he's going to want to have this privacy around his child. And Meghan Markle, we've got Mars there in Cancer, is actually in its least happy place in the sky, and where it's perhaps the most protective emotionally, because Cancer is a water emotional type of sign. And Mars ruling Scorpio is also emotional, those deep inner emotions. So putting that deep inner emotions in a watery sign of Cancer can mean that the person wants to be very protective, mother bear, making sure that no harm comes to this child. So there's a tension for both of these people between now what they're famous for and the child that they, for different reasons, want to keep private. And we've seen how this has played out, although it hasn't finished playing out yet. But it's after the birth of this child for both of them that they make a break from the royal family, having, very consciously committed to doing that. And it's an incredibly public role. And it must have been an enormous decision to try to step away from that. So we can see how the child being linked to the 10th house of activation has perhaps provided this impetus to do something quite astounding, quite high risk, quite unknown. But the dynamics of the energy have made that seem like the best course of action or the only course of action. And so we can see that in if you want to go to either of these up on my website, you can see Prince Harry's 5th house and Meghan's 5th house, where we talk about, see how the birth of Harry's first child activated his 5th house and changed his life. So that's all of those indicators are kind of discussed in there, but we can bring it to some of the sources quoted in that essay, which I think actually this source is quoted in the 8th house, but we've got an article here. Prince Harry wants to give Archie the childhood he always wanted. And then the byline, they are both extremely attentive parents. And we can see from looking at the charts that this child is placed in a very important way in both charts. For one person, it's in their 10th house of activation. For the other person, it's in their 1st house. So no wonder they've got their attention on this. And then there's just there's a beautiful quote here. They're both extremely attentive parents. Harry wants to give Archie the childhood he always wanted. They spend a ton of time outside. Both Harry and Meghan love to play. So, we don't know if this was even said, we're not a fly on the wall, but having the 5th Lord, Mars, on the 1st house for Meghan would definitely indicate that playful kind of personality. I thought this quote is really touching. I think this is what I used in the essay. So Harry previously opened up about wanting a different life for his family. He revealed that he didn't regret the couple's decision to step down as senior royals, and that he didn't want Meghan and Archie to go through what he went through as a child. So it's really interesting, isn't it, the different motivations that we have around our children and how they can activate things in our lives. Obviously, this is just one example, and it actually, I pick it because you can read it on the blog and see more detail, but really this has got very much the same themes in it, and this, it could be very different. And as you think of yourself, and perhaps you contrast these with Prince William and Catherine, that their relationship with their children, it seems quite different. It'd be really good to look at their charts, which I haven't had a look at, but perhaps a little bit more reserved and responsible. They have a different way of handling their children in the press, and maybe just a little bit more detachment of their identity from their children, perhaps don't know them, haven't seen their chart, something that we need to look into. But whereas you can see in this chart, they're echoing similar themes that each other, that this is really important to these people. And for Prince Harry, very activating of his life path. For Meghan Markle, right on her first house life path. So really important. So then for you guys watching the video and thinking about astrology and parenting, what are your takeaways from this conversation? Do you notice that, for example, you were surprised when you had children, how you felt about them? Did you have apprehension before you had children, whether you would enjoy it or not enjoy it? And what did you find out? And do you notice that your partner has a different natural relationship because of the energy that's in that person's natural way of being, that they find the children really fun, or they find the children really tiring, or they find the children really inspiring? Sometimes it's easy to notice that in a partner. You can see the difference between yourself and the other person. And I hope that it encourages you to embrace your role of being a parent in your own dynamic and unique way, that astrology is freeing us from some set stereotype of the way we relate to our children, and that our unique set of circumstances, which this planet that represents children could be in any one of the 12 houses. So we're really free to have our unique, personal, authentic self relationship with our children without the burden of thinking, I should be this kind of parent, or I should feel this way or that way towards my children. So maybe that's something that you can ponder in the coming days as I get ready to discuss this with the parent coach. And I look forward to seeing you on that follow-up video and on our primer for our next week's conversation. Okay, until then, stay well. Bye.